The silver dessert tray struck the marble floor before Nora Bennett could stop it. Crystal glasses shattered around the wheels of the old chair. Chocolate cake slid across the polished ballroom like mud. Hundreds of guests turned toward the sound. At the center of the mess sat a disabled beggar in a torn coat, his wet hair hanging across his face, his right hand resting calmly on the handle of a wooden cane. Bianca Vitale stood over him in a white evening gown. Her face was beautiful. Her expression was not. She pointed toward the ballroom doors and ordered the security guards to throw him into the street. Then she looked at Nora. Bianca told her that she was fired. Nora felt every eye in the room settle on her body, her flour-stained uniform, and the tray cloth hanging from her trembling hand. Some guests laughed. Others smiled behind their glasses. Bianca stepped closer and told Nora that people like them belong together. A desperate woman with no beauty. A broken man with no place among powerful people. The beggar lowered his head. For several seconds, Nora heard nothing except the rain striking the tall windows. Then she moved. She stepped between the wheelchair and the approaching guards. One guard quietly warned her to move aside. Nora refused. Bianca asked whether Nora intended to sacrifice her job for a stranger. Nora looked at the old man in the chair. He was not truly old. She had noticed that the first night she met him, his shoulders were too broad beneath the worn coat. His hands were scarred, but strong. His eyes were dark and watchful, as though he had spent his entire life memorizing the weaknesses of everyone around him. His damaged leg was real. His poverty appeared real. His dignity was more real than anything inside that ballroom. Nora told the guards that they would have to remove her first. The laughter stopped. Bianca moved forward and raised her hand. Nora saw the slap coming. She did not have time to move. The beggar caught the wrist of Bianca before her hand could touch Nora. The movement was fast, far too fast for a helpless man. Bianca stared down at the fingers locked around her wrist. The beggar lifted his face. The fear that appeared in the eyes of Bianca was immediate. He released her. Then he placed his left hand on the cane. With visible pain, he pushed himself out of the wheelchair. The room became silent. He stood slowly. His right leg shook beneath him, but his body remained straight. He removed the false beard from his face. One of the older guests dropped his glass. The ballroom doors opened. 12 men in black suits entered through the rain. Every one of them carried a weapon beneath his jacket. Every one of them stopped a few feet from the man with the cane. Then they lowered their heads. The beggar looked at Bianca. His voice was calm when he finally spoke. He said his name was Dominic Rinaldi, and the Rinaldi Grand Hotel belonged to him. 3 weeks earlier, Dominic had been sitting behind the tinted windows of a black limousine when he first heard Bianca laugh about his wheelchair. The engagement celebration was being held inside a private club near Central Park. The building belonged to Dominic. The staff belonged to Dominic. Half of the politicians inside the building owed Dominic favors that could never be written down. Yet Dominic had arrived through the service entrance because the pain in his leg was worse that evening. He did not want photographers to see one of his guards helping him out of the vehicle. He had learned long ago that powerful men were allowed to bleed, but never to appear weak. Dominic walked slowly through a private corridor with his cane. The assassination attempt 3 years earlier had shattered bone, torn muscle, and killed 2 men who had protected him since childhood. Doctors had told Dominic that he might never stand again. He proved them wrong. He could walk across a room. He could remain standing through a meeting. He could even dance for several minutes when no one was watching. But every step carried pain. Some days, he depended completely on the wheelchair. He had spent 3 years teaching the world that the chair had not made him less dangerous. Men who questioned that truth did not question it twice. Dominic reached the door of the private lounge and heard the voice of Bianca inside. She was speaking to 3 friends. None of them knew he was in the corridor. One woman asked whether Bianca was truly willing to marry a man who might spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Bianca laughed. She said she was marrying the Rinaldi empire, not the damaged leg of Dominic. Another woman asked how Bianca could tolerate being photographed beside him. Bianca said the photographs would improve after the wedding. She planned to control every public appearance. If Dominic needed the wheelchair, she would make certain that someone placed him where the cameras could not see it. She said the city would remember her as the beautiful wife who brought dignity back to the Rinaldi family. Then she wondered aloud whether the injury had damaged more than his leg. Her friends laughed. Dominic stood in the corridor without moving. His bodyguard, Salvatore Moretti, was waiting several feet behind him. Salvatore had been with Dominic since they were boys. He knew that silence was more dangerous than anger. Dominic walked away from the door. He did not enter the lounge. He did not confront Bianca. He attended the celebration as though he had heard nothing. Bianca kissed his cheek when he arrived. She placed one hand lovingly on his shoulder. She told photographers that the strength of Dominic inspired her. He watched her smile. For the first time, he wondered how many people in his life were smiling at his name instead of the man carrying it. Dominic had inherited the Rinaldi organization at 31. His father had ruled through violence. Dominic ruled through control. He owned shipping companies, private clubs, construction firms, luxury hotels, and warehouses along the eastern coast. He knew which police captains accepted money. He knew which senators kept hidden accounts. He knew which rival families were preparing for war before they knew it themselves. But he did not know whether a single woman had ever looked at him without seeing power. The marriage to Bianca had been arranged to end a conflict between the Rinaldi and Vitali families. Her father, Lorenzo Vitale, wanted access to the ports of Dominic. Dominic wanted peace before the conflict spilled into his legal businesses. Bianca was beautiful, educated, and trained from childhood to become the wife of a powerful man. Until that night, Dominic had believed that respect might grow between them. He had never expected love. Love was a luxury that men like Dominic usually paid for, with blood. After the celebration, he returned to the Rinaldi mansion. Rain covered the stone courtyard. Dominic refused help as he climbed the steps. By the time he reached the library, his right leg was shaking. He closed the doors, lowered himself into the wheelchair, and poured a drink. Salvatore remained near the fireplace. Dominic asked how many women had contacted the family since the assassination attempt. Salvatore said there had been more than 40. Some offered sympathy, some offered marriage. Several sent photographs. Dominic asked how many had contacted him before he inherited the empire. Salvatore did not answer. Dominic almost smiled. The answer was none. He looked through the rain-streaked windows. Then he told Salvatore that he wanted to disappear. Salvatore asked whether Dominic was planning to kill someone. Dominic said he was planning something more difficult. He wanted to learn the truth. 2 nights later, the most feared Mafia boss in New York vanished from his mansion. Only Salvatore and 4 trusted guards knew where he had gone. Dominic replaced his tailored suit with an old coat. A professional makeup artist loyal to the family darkened the skin beneath his eyes and covered part of his face with an uneven beard. He chose an old wheelchair from the rehabilitation center where he had recovered after the attack. One wheel pulled slightly to the left. The seat was cracked. Dominic refused to replace it. If he wanted people to believe he had nothing, he could not appear comfortable. Before sunrise, Salvatore drove him to the Rinaldi Grand Hotel. The hotel rose above Manhattan like a palace of gold and glass. Foreign leaders stayed in the upper suites. Celebrities held private celebrations in the ballroom. Men who feared the name of Dominic entered the hotel every day without realizing that he owned the ground beneath them. Salvatore stopped in an alley. Dominic transferred into the old wheelchair. The movement sent pain through his right leg. Salvatore asked once more whether the plan was necessary. Dominic told him to place guards around the building and keep them invisible. No one was to interfere unless his life was in immediate danger. Salvatore looked at the torn coat and the broken chair. He said the city did not deserve this test. Dominic replied that he was not testing the city. He was testing one woman. Bianca was scheduled to visit the hotel that morning for a wedding planning meeting. Dominic positioned the wheelchair beside the main entrance. Cold rain drifted beneath the hotel canopy. For the first hour, no one spoke to him. Guests stepped around the chair. A businessman complained to the doorman that homeless people were damaging the reputation of the hotel. A woman pulled her child away when the child tried to smile at Dominic. Two young men laughed when the faulty wheel caught against the edge of the pavement. Dominic lowered his head and remained silent. He had been threatened with guns. He had been betrayed by men he once called brothers. He had survived an explosion that tore metal through his leg. Yet the casual contempt of strangers disturbed him in a way that violence never had. Violence admitted that he mattered. Indifference treated him as though he did not exist. Near 10 in the morning, a line of black vehicles stopped outside the hotel. Bianca stepped from the first car. She wore a pale coat, diamond earrings, and shoes that cost more than most hotel workers earned in a month. Three friends followed her. Dominic watched through the hair covering his face. One of the women noticed him. She whispered something to Bianca. Bianca laughed. She asked the doorman why the beggar had not been removed. The doorman explained that security was already coming. Dominic moved the chair forward. The damaged wheel slipped into a shallow crack filled with rainwater. He leaned down and tried to pull it free. Bianca watched him struggle. Then she removed several coins from her purse. She threw them onto the wet pavement. The coins scattered beneath the wheelchair. Bianca told him to move before important guests arrived. Dominic looked directly into her eyes. There was no recognition. The woman who had touched his face the previous evening did not recognize his gaze. One of her friends covered her nose and laughed. Then the service door opened. A young woman in a white bakery uniform ran into the rain. She was carrying a paper bag beneath one arm. Flour marked both sleeves of her uniform. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose knot. She was chubby, soft around the waist and face, and completely unlike the polished women standing beneath the hotel canopy. She stopped beside the wheelchair. Dominic expected her to hand him the bag. Instead, she knelt on the wet pavement. She collected each coin. Then she stood and placed them into the hand of Bianca. The entrance became silent. The young woman told Bianca that kindness meant helping someone stand. It did not mean throwing money at them from a safe distance. Bianca stared at her. She asked for the name of the employee. The young woman said her name was Nora Bennett. Bianca repeated the name as though committing it to memory. Then she looked over the body of Nora. She asked whether the bakery had begun hiring women who ate more cakes than they sold. One of the friends of Bianca laughed. Color rose into the face of Nora. Dominic saw the pain before she hid it. Nora did not insult Bianca. She did not lower her head. She simply removed her coat and placed it around the shoulders of Dominic. Then she walked behind the chair and pushed him toward the service entrance. Bianca ordered her to stop. Nora kept moving. The broken wheel resisted every turn. Nora pushed harder until they disappeared into the hotel. The service corridor smelled of bread, coffee, and warm sugar. Nora pushed Dominic into a quiet storage room beside the bakery. She locked the door and knelt beside the wheel. She apologized for the behavior of Bianca. Dominic asked whether Bianca owned the hotel. Nora said she acted as though she owned everything. Dominic asked why Nora had risked her job. Nora looked surprised by the question. She said she had not protected him because she was brave. She had protected him because everyone else had decided that he did not deserve protection. Nora opened the paper bag. Inside was a warm roll filled with cheese and herbs. She gave it to him. Dominic asked whether she always carried food for strangers. Nora said the bread had been intended for her breakfast. Dominic looked at the roll. No one had given him a meal in years without expecting a favor. He asked whether she was not hungry. Nora said she worked in a bakery. She would survive. He told her his name was Dom. She waited for a family name. Dominic said nothing more. Nora studied his face. She did not ask why he was homeless. She did not ask what had happened to his leg. She looked at the damaged wheel and said she knew someone in maintenance who might have a tool. Dominic almost told her the truth. Instead, he watched her leave. Salvatore entered through another door less than a minute later. He placed a new coat across the back of a chair. Dominic told him to remove it. Salvatore looked at the coat belonging to Nora around the shoulders of Dominic. Then he looked toward the door. He asked whether the test was complete. Dominic said it had only begun. Nora returned with a screwdriver and a wrench. Salvatore had already disappeared. She spent 20 minutes tightening the wheel. Dominic asked how a baker had learned to repair a wheelchair. Nora said her father had been a mechanic. The mention of her father changed something in her face. Dominic noticed. He asked whether the man still worked in the city. Nora said her father was dead. Then she turned the wheel and tested it with her hand. The chair moved more smoothly. Dominic thanked her. Nora said he could thank her by staying away from the front entrance until Bianca left. She explained that Bianca remembered every person who embarrassed her. Dominic asked whether Bianca often embarrassed Nora. Nora gave him a tired smile. She said beautiful women sometimes believe cruelty was another form of elegance. Before returning to work, she told Dominic to meet her behind the bakery after 6 if he needed more food. Dominic watched her leave. He had ordered men killed with less hesitation than he felt over accepting that invitation. At 6:15, Nora found him near the loading entrance. The rain had stopped. Steam rose from the pavement. She carried 2 cups of coffee and a box of leftover pastries. Nora sat on an overturned crate beside the wheelchair. Dominic asked whether employees were allowed to give away food. She said the pastries would be thrown out at midnight. Dominic said the hotel should donate them. Nora laughed softly. She told him he sounded like he owned the place. For one dangerous second, Dominic thought she knew. Then she handed him a pastry. They watched expensive cars arrive near the front entrance. Nora guessed which guests were happy and which were pretending. Dominic asked how she could tell. She said happy people looked at the person beside them. Unhappy people looked around to see who was watching. Dominic thought of Bianca. For the next several evenings, he returned to the loading entrance. Sometimes Nora brought soup. Sometimes she brought coffee. Once she found him trying to move through heavy rain and pushed his wheelchair into the closed bakery. The kitchen was dark, except for the ovens cooling along the wall. Nora turned on one small light. The warm glow softened the sharp lines of his face. She showed him how to shape dough. Dominic told her his hands were not made for delicate work. Nora said hands became what people taught them to become. Dominic pressed his thumb too hard and ruined the dough. Nora laughed. The sound caught him unprepared. Most people stopped laughing when he entered a room. Nora laughed because he had failed to shape a piece of bread. He should have been offended. Instead, he wanted to hear the sound again. Nora believed Dom had once been a driver. Dominic did not correct her. She imagined that an accident had cost him his job and home. He allowed the lie to grow. Each evening made the truth more difficult to reveal. Dominic learned that Nora lived in a small apartment in Queens with her younger sister, Lily. Their mother had owned a neighborhood bakery before becoming ill. Medical debt took the building. Nora wanted to buy it back. But every dollar she saved disappeared into rent, bills, and the university expenses of Lily. Dominic asked why Nora did not seek help from wealthy people. She told him that help from powerful people usually came with invisible chains. The words struck deeper than she knew. Dominic wanted to tell her that he could purchase the bakery before breakfast. He could erase every debt in her name with one telephone call. But Dom could do none of those things. Dom had nothing except an old chair, a wounded leg, and the few hours Nora gave him after work. For the first time in his life, Dominic was grateful to possess nothing. Nora spoke to him without fear. She disagreed with him. She told him when he was being arrogant. She asked about his pain without pity. When his leg became stiff, she placed a folded towel beneath his foot and continued talking as though the gesture meant nothing. Dominic began planning his days around 6 in the evening. Salvatore noticed. He told Dominic that the Vitali family had become suspicious about his absence. Dominic said he was recovering at a private medical retreat. Salvatore asked how long the deception would continue. Dominic did not answer. The following morning, Bianca ordered the hotel manager to transfer Nora from the bakery to the cleaning staff. The manager, Paul Mercer, obeyed immediately. Nora arrived for work and found her uniform replaced with a gray cleaning dress. Her supervisor refused to look at her. Nora asked what she had done wrong. The manager said guests had complained about her attitude. Nora knew which guest. She needed the job. She changed uniforms. For 3 days, Bianca created reasons to humiliate her. She spilled wine beside a group of guests and ordered Nora to clean it. She dropped food onto the carpet and complained that Nora was moving too slowly. She told a wedding planner that Nora should never be allowed near the cake because no bride wanted to see a woman who represented a lack of self-control. Nora endured each insult. Dominic learned everything. His guards had been watching the hotel. When Salvatore described the treatment of Nora, Dominic gripped the handle of his cane until his knuckles turned white. He ordered Salvatore to bring the manager to him. Then he stopped. If he revealed his identity, Nora would learn that Dom had never existed. She would know that he had watched her suffer while holding the power to stop it. Dominic hated the hesitation inside himself. He had never feared telling the truth. Now he feared the expression that might appear in the eyes of Nora when she discovered his deception. He decided to wait until after the gala. The Vitali family was organizing a charity gala inside the hotel. Dominic had received information that Marco Rinaldi, his ambitious cousin, had arranged a secret meeting during the event. Marco had spent years pretending to support Dominic. He controlled several warehouses and believed the injury had made Dominic unfit to lead. Dominic suspected Marco had connections to the assassination attempt. He lacked proof. The disguise allowed him to move near the hotel without attracting attention. He intended to remain Dom until he discovered who was meeting Marco. That evening, Nora found him behind the loading entrance. Her hands were red from cleaning chemicals. Dominic asked what had happened to her uniform. Nora told him not to worry. He asked whether Bianca had caused the transfer. Nora remained silent. Dominic promised that Bianca would regret it. Nora looked at him with amusement. She asked whether he planned to attack Bianca with a loaf of bread. Dominic said there were worse weapons. Nora sat beside him. She seemed exhausted. Dominic wanted to touch her hand. His fingers moved slightly on the arm of the chair. Then he stopped. Dom had no right to offer comfort built upon a lie. Nora looked at the scars near his wrist. She asked whether they came from the accident. Dominic said some scars came from the accident. Others came from what happened afterward. Nora waited. He told her that powerful men had surrounded him most of his life. When he became injured, he discovered that many of them respected his strength more than they respected him. Nora asked whether he had been wealthy. Dominic said wealth had not made him less lonely. She looked toward the city lights. Nora told him that loneliness was not the absence of people. It was the absence of anyone before whom a person could stop pretending. Dominic turned toward her. Their eyes held. For several seconds, the sounds of the loading dock disappeared. He lifted one hand. He almost touched the strand of hair that had fallen across her cheek. A vehicle door slammed in the alley. Dominic lowered his hand. 2 men were walking toward them. Their clothes were ordinary. Their movements were not. Dominic recognized one of them as an enforcer connected to the Vitali family. His guards were positioned on the roofs and inside a nearby vehicle. He knew Salvatore would intervene at the first sign of danger. Nora knew none of this. The men stopped several feet from the wheelchair. One asked whether Dominic had seen a black car leave the alley. Dominic said no. The second man moved behind him. Dominic felt the weight of a hidden weapon beneath the coat of the man. His body remained calm. Before he could signal his guards, Nora stepped between the men and the wheelchair. She grabbed a metal tray from a stack near the loading door. She raised it with both hands and shouted for help. The first man smiled. He told her to move. Nora refused. Her hands shook, but her feet remained planted. The man reached toward her. A red light appeared briefly on his chest, a signal from one of the rifles positioned above the alley. He noticed it. Both men retreated. They disappeared into a waiting car before the hotel security team reached the loading entrance. Nora dropped the tray. She turned toward Dominic. Her face had lost all color. She asked whether he was hurt. Dominic stared at her. She had placed her body between him and two armed men. She had no reason to believe help was coming. She had no reason to believe he could protect himself. She had believed his life possessed value. Nora pushed his chair through the rain and into the bakery. She locked the doors. Her breathing remained unsteady. Dominic told her that she should not have stepped between them. Nora asked what she was supposed to do. Watch them hurt him. Dominic said she might have been injured. Nora answered that fear did not remove responsibility. She knelt before the wheelchair. She placed both hands over his. Dominic stopped breathing. Nora asked him to promise that he would not sleep outside that night. Dominic looked at her fingers around his scarred hands. He said he would find somewhere safe. Nora said he could sleep in the storeroom. Dominic almost laughed at the thought of sleeping beneath his own hotel in secret. Instead, he agreed. Nora found blankets. She brought him soup. Before leaving, she paused at the door. She told him that he deserved a life better than this. After she disappeared, Salvatore entered. He was furious. He said the disguise was no longer safe. Dominic told him to identify the men. Salvatore said they were connected to Lorenzo Vitali. Dominic looked toward the door through which Nora had left. He asked Salvatore to investigate the Bennett family. Salvatore returned the following afternoon with a file. The name of the father of Nora was Samuel Bennett. Dominic recognized it before Salvatore opened the folder. Samuel had worked as a driver and mechanic for the Rinaldi family when Dominic was 22. One evening, Samuel discovered that the brakes of a vehicle assigned to Dominic had been altered. He prevented Dominic from entering the car. Hours later, the vehicle crashed during a test drive. The driver survived. An internal investigation began. Several days later, stolen money and confidential records were found inside the locker of Samuel. Samuel was accused of betraying the family. Dominic had been young, angry, and eager to prove loyalty to his father. He had accepted the evidence. Samuel disappeared from the organization in disgrace. He died years later with the city believing he was a thief. Dominic closed the file. He remembered Samuel as a quiet man with grease on his hands. He remembered the night Samuel had stood in front of the car and refused to let Dominic enter. He remembered his father calling Samuel a traitor. Dominic had done nothing. He had believed what powerful men told him to believe. Now the daughter of Samuel was feeding him bread. Dominic ordered Salvatore to reopen the investigation. Every document, every witness, every account. He wanted the truth before the gala. Salvatore asked what Dominic would tell Nora. Dominic said nothing. He did not yet know how to confess that her family had been destroyed by the man whose wheelchair she had pushed through the rain. Over the next week, Dominic became more protective. He placed guards near the apartment of Nora without telling her. He ordered the manager to stop assigning her to late shifts, but delivered the order through an anonymous executive. He arranged for the medical bill of Lily to be reviewed after learning she needed treatment for a chronic condition. Nora rejected the financial assistance because she did not know who had offered it. Dominic admired her refusal and hated it at the same time. He had spent years solving problems with money and fear. Nora resisted both, without even knowing they came from him. Their evenings became more intimate. They spoke about regret. Nora told him that her father had died, believing no one would ever clear his name. She still kept an old recipe box that had belonged to her mother. Inside were handwritten notes from both parents. Nora said the box was the only part of the family history that no creditor had taken. Dominic asked where she kept it. Nora smiled and said, "A former driver did not need to know all her secrets." Dominic looked away. The question had sounded too much like an interrogation. One night, he found Nora sitting alone in the bakery. Bianca had mocked her in front of several guests. Nora had remained strong until everyone left. Then she cried in the dark. Dominic stopped outside the doorway. He had seen men beg for their lives. He had watched enemies lose everything. None of it affected him like the sight of Nora trying to hide tears with both hands. He moved the wheelchair beside her. Nora apologized. Dominic asked why she was apologizing. She said strong people were not supposed to cry over cruel words. Dominic told her that strength was not the absence of pain. It was the decision not to become cruel because of it. Nora looked at him. She said he sounded like a man who had spent years becoming cruel. Dominic did not deny it. He lifted his hand. This time, he touched her face. His thumb brushed one tear from her cheek. Nora did not move away. The air between them changed. Dominic could hear the ovens cooling. He could feel the warmth of her skin beneath his hand. Nora whispered his name. Dom. The name felt like both a gift and a wound. Dominic leaned closer. His gaze dropped to her lips. Then a sharp pain moved through his leg. His body tensed. Nora immediately pulled back and asked whether he needed help. The moment disappeared. Dominic hated his body for interrupting him. Then he hated himself for almost kissing her while she still believed a lie. He told Nora that she should stay away from him. Her expression changed. She asked whether she had misunderstood the moment. Dominic said the danger around him was increasing. Nora asked what danger a homeless former driver could possibly attract. Dominic had no answer. He left before she could ask again. The investigation into Samuel Bennett uncovered the first evidence 2 days before the charity gala. A retired accountant admitted that Samuel had discovered payments between Lorenzo Vitale and a Rinaldi employee. The payments occurred before the altered brakes were found. The accountant had remained silent because the father of Dominic threatened his family. The Rinaldi employee was Marco. Dominic studied the records until sunrise. Marco and Lorenzo had been working together for more than a decade. The marriage between Dominic and Bianca had never been intended to create peace. It had been designed to place the Vitale family inside the Rinaldi empire. The assassination attempt 3 years earlier was part of the same plan. If Dominic died, Marco would inherit control. If Dominic survived but appeared weak, Bianca would marry him and slowly transfer power to her father. Samuel Bennett had discovered the alliance years earlier. He had saved Dominic from the first attempt. Then he had been framed. Dominic asked whether Samuel had left evidence. Salvatore said several documents were missing. A witness remembered Samuel carrying a small key shortly before he disappeared. Dominic thought of the recipe box. He realized that Nora might possess the final proof. He also understood that Marco might reach the same conclusion. Dominic ordered more guards around Nora. Salvatore warned that the gala should be canceled. Dominic refused. Marco and Lorenzo believed Dominic was still away from the city. The gala was the only opportunity to draw them into the open. Dominic planned to attend in disguise. Salvatore said Nora should be removed from the hotel. Dominic looked at the ballroom security plans. He said Nora would never forgive him if he destroyed her job without explanation. Salvatore replied that forgiveness would not matter if Nora was dead. Dominic went silent. The thought created a fear unlike anything he had known. He had survived bullets. He had watched the empire of his father collapse around him. He had never feared losing another person because he had never allowed anyone close enough to be lost. Nora had entered his life, carrying bread. Now the possibility of her absence felt like a hand closing around his throat. Dominic ordered Salvatore to place 2 guards inside the bakery and 3 near Nora during the gala. They were to appear as hotel employees. Nora must never know. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers on the night of the gala. Politicians stood beside actors. Business leaders drank champagne beneath gold decorations. Bianca wore a silver gown and the engagement ring of Dominic. She told guests that her future husband was recovering in Switzerland. Nora was ordered to serve desserts. The gray cleaning uniform had been replaced with a black service dress. Bianca had chosen a size too small. Nora understood the purpose immediately. She wore it anyway. Dominic entered through the service corridor in the old wheelchair. His beard was wet from the rain. The torn coat concealed a weapon and a communication device. Salvatore remained several rooms away. Marco was expected to meet one of the men of Lorenzo near the private wine cellar. Dominic positioned himself near the ballroom entrance. For 20 minutes, no one noticed him. Then Nora appeared with a tray of cakes. She saw him. Shock crossed her face. She hurried toward him and asked why he had come. Dominic said he needed to speak with her. Nora told him the hotel was too dangerous that night. She tried to push his wheelchair toward the service corridor. Bianca saw them. Her expression changed. She crossed the ballroom. Guests turned to watch. Bianca asked whether Nora had brought a beggar into the charity gala. Nora said he had entered on his own. Bianca grabbed the dessert tray. She threw it onto the floor. The crash echoed beneath the chandeliers. Broken glass scattered around the chair. Bianca told Nora that she had embarrassed the hotel for the final time. Nora knelt to collect the glass. Bianca ordered her to stand. Nora rose slowly. Bianca announced that Nora was fired. She looked around at the guests. Then she said, perhaps Nora and the beggar should leave together. The room filled with quiet laughter. Bianca said neither of them would ever be accepted by people of power. Nora looked at Dominic. He saw the humiliation burning beneath her calm expression. His restraint began to break. One word from him would end everything. One signal would bring armed men into the ballroom. But Salvatore spoke through the hidden device beneath his coat. Marco was moving toward the cellar. Dominic needed several more minutes. Bianca ordered security to remove the beggar. 2 guards approached. They were not the men assigned by Dominic. They belonged to Lorenzo. Dominic noticed the shape of weapons beneath their jackets. Nora stepped in front of his wheelchair. She refused to move. Bianca asked whether Nora had fallen in love with him. The laughter grew louder. Nora looked at the guests. Then she said she would rather stand beside a man with nothing than kneel before a woman without kindness. Bianca raised her hand. Dominic moved before the slap could fall. He caught the wrist of Bianca. The room became silent. The message from Salvatore entered his earpiece. Marco had entered the cellar. The meeting was recorded. The evidence was secured. Dominic no longer needed the disguise. He released the wrist of Bianca. He placed one hand on the cane and rose from the wheelchair. Pain tore through his damaged leg. He welcomed it. Pain was honest. Unlike the people surrounding him, it had never pretended to be anything else. Dominic removed the false beard. The color drained from the face of Bianca. The ballroom doors opened. Salvatore entered with the Rinaldi guards. Several guests moved backward. The security men loyal to Lorenzo reached toward their jackets. Red lights appeared on their chests. They froze. Dominic looked across the ballroom. He said his name was Dominic Rinaldi. No one laughed. He told them that for several days he had been sitting outside his own hotel. He had watched wealthy guests ignore him. He had watched employees follow cruel orders. He had watched the woman he was expected to marry throw money at a disabled man because she believed he possessed no power. Bianca stepped toward him. She said she had not known. Dominic told her that ignorance was the reason she had failed. She would have treated him with kindness if she recognized his name. Nora had treated him with kindness because she believed he had nothing. Bianca began to apologize. Dominic asked whether she was apologizing to the beggar or the Mafia boss. Bianca could not answer. Dominic took her left hand. He removed the engagement ring. Then he announced that the alliance between the Rinaldi and Vitale families was over. Lorenzo Vitale stood near the far side of the ballroom. His expression remained controlled. Dominic looked at him and said they would speak soon. Then Dominic turned toward Nora. He expected relief. He expected surprise. He was not prepared for the pain in her eyes. Nora stepped away from him. She looked at the wheelchair, the torn coat, and the men waiting for his command. She asked whether Dom had ever existed. Dominic said his injury was real. His loneliness was real. Nora asked whether the hotel was his. Dominic said yes. She asked whether he had known Bianca was humiliating her. Dominic hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. Nora looked around the ballroom. She understood that every conversation had been part of a test. Every meal, every cup of coffee, every moment of trust. She said poor people were not toys for powerful men who became bored with their lives. Dominic said he had never intended to hurt her. Nora asked whether he believed intention erased humiliation. Dominic stepped toward her. His leg nearly failed. Salvatore moved forward. Dominic raised one hand and stopped him. Nora watched the gesture. She saw how quickly an entire room obeyed him. She told Dominic that he could have stopped Bianca at any time. He had allowed the cruelty to continue because his test mattered more than her dignity. Dominic said he was trying to uncover a threat. Nora asked whether she had been part of that investigation as well. Dominic thought of Samuel Bennett. He could not speak. Nora saw another secret in his silence. She removed her hotel identification card and placed it on the broken tray. Then she walked out of the ballroom. Dominic did not order anyone to stop her. For the first time in his life, he understood that power could force a person to remain in a room. It could not force trust to remain in a heart. Nora returned to the apartment in Queens before midnight. She packed her hotel uniforms into a bag. Lily asked what had happened. Nora said she had trusted the wrong man. She could not explain more without crying. She placed the old recipe box on the kitchen table. The wood had faded with age. Her mother had painted small flowers across the lid. Inside were recipes, photographs, and a note from her father. Nora touched the handwriting. She wondered how many parts of her life had been shaped by men keeping secrets. Across the city, Dominic entered the private office of the hotel. Bianca and Lorenzo were waiting with Marco. Rinaldi guards stood along the walls. Bianca demanded an explanation. Dominic ignored her. He placed the recording from the wine cellar on the desk. The voice of Marco filled the room. Marco discussed moving weapons through the Rinaldi port. He referred to the injury of Dominic and said the next attempt would not fail. Lorenzo remained expressionless. Marco reached for his weapon. Salvatore struck his hand aside. The guards forced Marco to his knees. Dominic asked where the evidence belonging to Samuel Bennett had gone. Marco smiled. He said the daughter of Samuel possessed it. Dominic felt cold. Marco said Samuel had hidden a key before his death. They had searched every property connected to him except the personal belongings kept by Nora. Dominic asked whether men had already been sent. Marco smiled again. Dominic turned toward Salvatore. The first explosion shook the windows before he could speak. It came from the parking structure. The lights failed. Gunfire erupted in the corridor. Lorenzo had prepared the attack before entering the office. Dominic drew his weapon. He fired at the lock as two Vitale men forced the door open. The room filled with smoke and shouting. Dominic moved behind the desk. His right leg collapsed beneath him. He fell hard, but kept firing. Salvatore pulled him toward the wall. Marco escaped through the private entrance. Dominic ordered the guards to protect Nora. Salvatore said the routes were blocked. Dominic forced himself into the wheelchair. He refused evacuation. He told Salvatore that they were going to Queens. Nora heard footsteps in the apartment hallway. At first, she believed a neighbor was returning home. Then the handle of the door moved. Lily stepped from the bedroom. Nora raised one finger to her lips. The lock broke. Two men entered. Nora threw the recipe box beneath the table. She pushed Lily toward the fire escape. One man grabbed Nora by the arm. She struck him with a ceramic bowl. The second man reached for Lily. A gunshot sounded in the hallway. The man fell against the wall. Salvatore entered first. Dominic followed in the wheelchair with a weapon in his hand. Rainwater covered his coat. Blood marked one sleeve. But the injury was shallow. Nora stared at him. Dominic fired at the man holding her. The bullet struck the wall beside his head. The man released Nora immediately. Rinaldi guards dragged both attackers into the hallway. Dominic looked at Nora and Lily. He asked whether they were hurt. Nora said no. Dominic ordered Salvatore to move Lily to the safe house. Nora refused. Dominic told her that Marco believed she possessed evidence left by her father. Nora looked toward the recipe box. Dominic saw it. He asked whether there was a hidden compartment. Nora said it was only a box. Dominic lowered himself from the wheelchair. He used the cane to reach the table. His damaged leg trembled. Nora watched him struggle. For the first time, she understood that the injury had never been false. The pain in his face could not be disguised. Dominic placed the box on the table. He examined the wooden base. One corner was thicker than the others. Nora found a small latch beneath the lining. The bottom opened. Inside was a brass key and a folded list of dates written in code. Lily covered her mouth. Nora stared at the hidden compartment. Dominic told her that her father had saved his life. Nora looked at him sharply. Dominic explained the altered brakes. He explained the accusation. He admitted that he had believed Samuel was guilty. Nora asked whether Dominic had helped destroy the name of her father. Dominic said yes. The word cost him more than any wound. He told her that he had been young. But youth was not innocence. He should have questioned the evidence. He had not. Nora asked why she should believe him now. Dominic said she should not. Not yet. He placed the brass key into her hand. He told her that the truth belonged to her. Nora looked at the blood on his sleeve. She asked whether he had come to save the evidence. Dominic answered immediately. He had come to save her. The storage facility stood near the Brooklyn waterfront. The brass key opened a private box, rented under the name of the mother of Nora. Dominic brought Nora there before sunrise. Salvatore and the guards secured the building. Inside the box were photographs, financial records, and a small recording device. The final message of Samuel Bennett had been waiting for more than a decade. Nora pressed the button. The voice of her father filled the narrow room. Samuel said he had discovered an alliance between Marco Rinaldi and Lorenzo Vitali. He said they had altered the brakes of the vehicle belonging to Dominic. He had removed Dominic from danger. But he knew they would frame him. Samuel listed account numbers and dates. Then, his voice softened. He said he hoped Nora and Lily would one day understand why he could not return home. He said the Rinaldi family might condemn his name, but he had remained loyal to the promise he made when Dominic was born. He had protected the son even when the father refused to protect him. Nora began to cry. Dominic stood behind her with the cane. He did not touch her. He wanted to. He knew he had no right. When the recording ended, Nora asked why Dominic had waited so many years to search for the truth. Dominic said he had not been searching. He had believed the lie. Nora turned toward him. She told him that honesty sounded different when it arrived without excuses. Dominic lowered his gaze. He said he would restore the name of Samuel publicly. Nora said her father deserved more than a speech. Dominic agreed. She asked what would happen to Marco and Lorenzo. Dominic looked toward the dark water beyond the storage facility. He said there would be a family meeting. The meeting was held inside the same ballroom where Nora had been humiliated. Dominic chose the location deliberately. Representatives of both families arrived before sunset. Politicians and business leaders who had witnessed the gala were also invited. Bianca entered, wearing black. She believed Dominic intended to restore the engagement to prevent war. Marco stood beside her father. He had escaped the hotel attack, but Dominic allowed him to believe the escape had succeeded. Armed Rinaldi men surrounded the building. Nora waited in a private room. She wore a simple dark dress. Dominic had offered to purchase something more expensive. She refused. He did not ask again. Before the meeting, Dominic entered the room alone. He was using the wheelchair. His leg had become swollen after the attack. Nora looked at the chair. Dominic asked whether it made her uncomfortable. Nora said the chair had never been the problem. The lie had been the problem. Dominic accepted the answer. He told her she did not have to enter the ballroom. Nora said her father had been condemned in rooms he was not allowed to enter. She would not remain outside when his name was restored. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. He said Marco might insult her. Nora asked whether Dominic believed she could not survive words. Dominic said he knew she could survive them. He simply did not want her to face them alone. The honesty in his voice unsettled her. Nora walked beside him into the ballroom. The room became silent. Bianca stared at her. Marco smiled. Dominic placed the evidence on the central table. He played the recording of Samuel. He revealed the financial transfers. He showed photographs of meetings between Lorenzo and Marco. He presented the recording from the wine cellar. Marco denied everything. Lorenzo called the evidence a fabrication. Dominic invited the retired accountant into the room. The man confirmed every payment. Marco turned toward Nora. He called her a desperate bakery worker who had manipulated a disabled man. Dominic moved before Salvatore could react. He rose from the wheelchair with the cane. Pain tightened his face. He crossed the space between them. Then he struck Marco once. Marco fell against the table. Dominic stood over him. He told every person in the ballroom that no one would insult Nora Bennett again. He announced that Samuel Bennett had saved his life and protected the Rinaldi family from betrayal. He declared that every accusation against Samuel had been false. The Rinaldi organization owed its survival to the man it had condemned. Dominic ordered that the Bennett name be entered into the permanent family record with the highest honor. Lorenzo moved toward the exit. The doors locked. Salvatore presented evidence connecting Lorenzo and Marco to the assassination attempt that damaged the leg of Dominic and killed 2 Rinaldi guards. The allies of Lorenzo stepped away from him. Bianca looked around the room. She understood that the power of her family was collapsing. She approached Dominic. She reminded him that the marriage could still prevent war. Dominic said the war had already begun the moment her family attacked his car. Bianca looked at Nora. She said powerful families would laugh if Dominic chose a bakery worker. She said Nora could never belong in their world. Dominic turned toward the gathered families. He told them that he would rather be laughed at beside a loyal woman than respected beside a traitor. Bianca stared at him. For the first time, she understood that she had lost more than an engagement. She had lost the only man powerful enough to protect the empire she wanted. Dominic ordered the guards to remove Marco and Lorenzo. Their punishment would be decided by the Rinaldi Council. Bianca was allowed to leave under supervision. No one stopped her when she walked from the ballroom. The room remained silent. Dominic turned toward Nora. He reached inside his jacket. Several guests expected him to produce a ring. Instead, Dominic placed an empty hand over his heart. He apologized. He told Nora that he had hidden his name because he was afraid no woman could love him without loving his power. He had convinced himself that the deception was protection. In truth, it had been cowardice. He had tested her character while refusing to reveal his own. Dominic said he had no right to ask for forgiveness. He had no right to ask her to stay. Nora looked at the most feared men in the city. Every one of them waited for the command of Dominic. Then she looked at the man leaning heavily on his cane. She saw power. She also saw fear. Dominic was afraid that she would leave. Nora told him that apologies did not repair trust in one night. Dominic said he knew. She said love could not grow where one person controlled every door. Dominic moved away from the entrance. He told her the door was open. Nora walked through it. Dominic did not follow. During the following months, Dominic changed the hotel. Paul Mercer was removed as manager. The employees punished by Bianca received their positions back with compensation. Unused food from the hotel kitchens was donated every evening. A fund was created in the name of Samuel Bennett to support mechanics, drivers, and service workers injured while protecting others. Dominic restored the official record of Samuel. He sent the documents to Nora without a letter. Then he purchased the abandoned bakery that had once belonged to her mother. The building was transferred to Nora with no debt and no conditions. The legal documents contained no Rinaldi name. Nora tried to return the property. The attorney explained that Dominic had surrendered every claim before the transfer. Nora could sell it, destroy it, or reopen it. Dominic would receive nothing. She reopened it. The bakery required months of work. Nora repaired the old ovens. Lily painted the walls. Former hotel workers volunteered on weekends. The sign above the door carried the name Bennett Family Bakery. On opening morning, customers formed a line along the sidewalk. Nora was arranging cakes when a black vehicle stopped across the street. Her body tensed. No guards appeared. No line of luxury cars followed. Dominic crossed the road alone. He wore a simple dark suit. He was sitting in his wheelchair. The morning was cold, and pain had made his face pale. Several customers recognized him. They moved aside. Dominic entered the bakery. Conversation stopped. Nora stood behind the counter. Dominic looked at the bread, the photographs of her parents, and the restored recipe box displayed behind glass. He asked whether the bakery served coffee. Nora said it did. She placed a cup in front of him. Dominic asked whether the coffee was free. Nora said nothing in her bakery was free. For the first time in months, Dominic smiled. He paid for the coffee. Then he asked whether she would consider having dinner with him. Nora placed a slice of cake beside the cup. She told him he could ask again after finishing it. Dominic looked at the large slice. He asked whether it was another test. Nora said it was consequences. He finished every bite. Dominic returned the following week. Then, the week after that, he did not bring gifts. He did not close the bakery for privacy. He waited in line with other customers. Sometimes he used the cane. Sometimes he used the wheelchair. He never apologized for either. Nora learned that Dominic was still dangerous. He remained cold during business meetings. He made decisions that frightened men twice his size. He did not become gentle with the world, but he listened to Nora. When she questioned an order, he explained it. When she said he was wrong, he did not punish her. He argued. He became angry. Then he reconsidered. The first time he invited her to dinner, he chose a quiet restaurant after closing time. No photographers were present. No political allies waited nearby. Dominic told her where they were going and who would be there. He gave her the choice to leave at any moment. Nora noticed every effort. She did not forgive him because he returned her bakery. She forgave him because he learned that love required honesty, even when honesty left him powerless. Their relationship grew slowly. Dominic remained protective. When a reporter insulted Nora, Dominic nearly destroyed the career of the man. Nora stopped him. She told Dominic that not every wound required blood. Dominic said that principle was inefficient. Nora told him to survive the inefficiency. He did. When pain kept Dominic awake, Nora sat beside him without pretending she could fix it. She never called him broken. She never praised him for standing. She asked what he needed and believed the answer. One winter evening, Dominic admitted that he feared becoming dependent on her. Nora asked whether he meant physically. He said no. He feared the silence of every room she did not enter. Nora took his hand. She told him dependence became dangerous only when it was used as a chain. Dominic promised never to chain her. Nora said promises were easy. He would have to prove it every day. Dominic answered that he intended to. 1 year after the gala, Dominic asked Nora to meet him outside the Rinaldi Grand Hotel. Snow covered the pavement. The old wheelchair waited beneath the golden canopy. It was the same chair he had used during the disguise. The wheel Nora repaired still pulled slightly to the left. Dominic sat in it wearing a simple suit. Salvatore and several guards waited near the black vehicles at a respectful distance. Nora approached in a dark coat. She looked at the chair. Then she looked at Dominic. He held a small ring box. Dominic said this was the place where she had seen him clearly before anyone else had. Nora reminded him that she had not known who he was. Dominic said that was why it mattered. He opened the box. The ring was elegant, but not extravagant. Dominic told her that he was not offering an alliance. He was not purchasing forgiveness. He was not asking her to enter his world and disappear inside it. He was asking whether she would build a life with him while remaining completely herself. Nora looked toward the powerful men waiting in silence. Then she looked at the man in front of her. The man with the empire. The man with the damaged leg. The man who had lied to her. The man who had learned to tell the truth. She told him that she was not marrying the Mafia boss. Dominic stopped breathing. Nora smiled. She said she was marrying Dom. Snow settled across the shoulders of Dominic. For several seconds, the most feared man in New York could not speak. Nora leaned down and kissed him. The guards looked away. Salvatore smiled. Dominic placed the ring on her finger. Then he pressed his forehead against hers. A year earlier, strangers had laughed at the disabled beggar outside the hotel. They had believed he possessed nothing. They had been wrong about his name. But Dominic had been wrong as well. He had believed true love could be discovered through a test. Nora taught him that love was not proven by perfect answers. It was built through imperfect truth. It lived in bread shared behind a hotel, in a coat placed around cold shoulders, in a woman stepping between danger and a man she believed could offer nothing in return. Dominic had spent his life commanding fear. Nora gave him something fear could never purchase. She gave him a place where he no longer needed to pretend. And when she pushed the old wheelchair away from the hotel, Dominic did not look back at the empire waiting behind him. He looked only at her, because the city knew him as Dominic Rinaldi. But the woman beside him knew the man he had once hidden beneath a torn coat. She knew Dom. And for the first time in his life, that was enough.